I always think I wouldn't have gone for it if I wasn't that naive, because if someone said to me, this is the reality of what you're about to go into, I would have run a mile.
Tag, thank you so much for chatting to us. Before we started recording, we were bonding over being one of 3 boys, right?
4.
One of 4 brothers.
Yeah.
Where do you sit in the lineup?
Apparently this is like dead on for the stereotype, is 3 or 4.
You're the 3rd, yeah?
So like first one is like the 3rd parent.
Yeah.
The second one's like super creative, free flying, loves life. I'm like chip on my shoulder, something to prove, like grew up in the kind of slight shadow of them, and therefore was like, I need to go and achieve loads in order to be valued.
Okay.
4th is experience through the older siblings, and therefore is like wiser beyond their years. And we meet loads of other 4 kid families, and we just match them every single time. So I always get along with the 3rd. Like, It's really bizarre.
Congratulations on, what is it, 6 years now at Gay Times?
Yeah, 5.5, yeah.
5.5, because you're recently 30?
Yeah, turned 30 recently.
How recently are you 30?
January,
okay.
Yeah.
Did you have a big celebration, or were you terrified of the whole thing?
No, I did have a big celebration. I did a big party, which was fun, and it was really nice. I think because I've been with the company for just over 5 years. I got the job when I was 24, so I've had like a lot of these years kind of I've experienced life through the company and the brand. And so in a way it was nice to do something, yes, it's a birthday party, but it was a kind of like nice way to bring people together from my personal life, like professional life, all in one space. And kind of,
was it a Gay Times? Was it wrapped into Gay Times? Or was it a completely personal?
No, it was just my birthday, but like I would say like 70% of the guest list was like something to do with Gay Times.
Yeah.
So like, I invited everyone at the company. I invited loads of talent and, people that we work with and producers and creatives. And, yes, they're friends of mine, but I've met them through the business, and that's kind of our primary relationship is through the company.
Yeah. And I suppose it must be hard to actually divide between your outside work life and your work life, because there becomes a point when it just merges into one. And I've got lots of questions on like how you actually navigate that, manage that, like how do you even take time off and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's definitely something the first couple of years of the role where I noticed that it was completely one and the same. So like having to understand what is like my personal identity, and then how do I kind of differentiate that from the company, was hard work. And it took work. Like it didn't just happen automatically, because it kind of bled really quickly. And then you sort of wake up one day and think like, actually my whole life is the company and the brand, and then vice versa. I think it's also kind of like, I think sometimes people look at that as a negative in some capacity, but the other thing is that, of course, when you run a business and you are trying to kind of lay out vision for a company, it's so much of you in it. Like there's bits of the company and what we do that I look at and think that's the part of who I am. And it's not like it's branded in that way, or that I'm even fronting it or I'm talking about it, but like it's something that is a part of like how I think about the world. So I think it's kind of natural that you get this kind of blurring that happens between the two things. However, as I said, it was important to me to like find out like a sense of purpose and identity that wasn't to do with the company, but did take some work.
Yeah. And also, if you love your job and you love the people you work with, you love the people you get to meet, the experiences you're having, then you kind of don't want to put that line as firmly in the sand between the two.
Yeah, because that's what I ever wanted. I mean, I came from a really corporate environment. That was the only real, kind of real proper kind of career style job that I had before Gay Times. And that was so binary. Everyone just talked about clocking off. Like everyone was desperate to get to the end of the day. Everyone was desperate to get to the weekend.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is really miserable. Like we're all just here to get to a point, like whether it's the end of the day or our next vacation. Like that's all people talked about. No one talked about the work. No one was interested in it. That's an exaggeration. I'm sure some people were, but the focus was to work to get money to do other things.
Yeah.
And actually all I craved was that blurredness. I was like, I wanted to have an existence where I don't like think, oh my God, I can't wait to go on vacation in order to like close my emails. It's just not how I'm built as a person. Like I feel really excited by the idea of doing productive things and work, and I want that to be flexible. And so that blurriness, I think, suits my personality. The downside of it, of course, is that blurriness can there's always more work. There's always more emails. There's always more strategy you can do. So the downside to that, of course, is that unless you put some boundaries in place, that blurry line can actually just become 100% work and 0% personal life. So it's a challenge to keep that kind of line. It'll be a blurry line somewhere healthy.
Yeah. It sounds like you had the nous really quickly to realize this wasn't for you and this lifestyle was just not sitting well with you.
Yeah, I actually, I met one of my really close friends at the time. He'll laugh that I even bring this up. And he, I remember I was probably a year into the job and I was like fully just like, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of like deluded, basically. Like I was fully deluded. I was like completely bought into the corporate lie.
Right.
I was like, this place is amazing. They love me for who I am. You know, if I work hard, I will get rewards. Life is great. This company is, you know, super wonderful, blah, blah. And I was so bought into all of it. And so I remember I met, as I say now, he's one of my closest friends, but at the time we just met. And I remember him sort of like sitting me down and being like, it's kind of probably not all you think it is. Like, have you considered that, you know, essentially, you know, in a nice way, he sort of said, you know, have you considered that you're basically a small cog in a big system, and really you don't matter. Like if you're not there tomorrow, it kind of doesn't matter. And I was like, no, I matter. Like I really matter because people value me, and like my manager likes me, and like I'm doing all these things. And I remember him just opening up that idea that actually, I kind of, I guess had this kind of idea that I was probably more, valuable than I maybe perhaps actually was. To the company and the business. So I'd say that started about a year in, and then between year 1 and year 2, that's when it sort of slowly started disintegrating.
Really?
And the real switch for me was this point where, of course, in that kind of more business environment, they talk a lot about like meritocracy and how if you work hard, you'll get rewarded. And I essentially was denied a ability to step up due to like time of length in service. So essentially the only reason I wasn't able to do it was just because I hadn't been around for long enough. So it wasn't because I wasn't good enough. It wasn't because the work wasn't good enough. It was just because I hadn't worked there for as many months. And so I was like, that doesn't even seem fair to me because I've got it on all of my effort and credentials, but I can't win just because I haven't existed in the world long enough. That feels unfair.
Yeah.
And that was really the kind of straw that broke the camel's back, where I was like, okay, maybe this isn't for me. Like I need to find something else.
So would you describe that part of your life and career as like an unhappy time in terms of your satisfaction with going to work every day?
No, not at all. Like I loved it really. And I think I gained a huge amount of experience from it. I had amazing colleagues. I had a great manager. It was overall a happy time. It's interesting because I think the two things can be the same at the same time. Like it was enjoyable. I learned so much and it gave me a huge amount, but at the same time, it wasn't right for me. So I think that like, I try to do this generally in life and not be too binary about anything. Like there was definitely light moments and there was some dark moments, but I think overall I look back on it with fondness and I kind of appreciate it for what it gave me. It's like a relationship when you go out with someone, you think you're a good person, you're just not right for me. Like that's kind of what I felt about it. And actually in leaving, having seen some of my colleagues sort of, you know, whenever that is now, it's probably nearing 10 years now, that have gone on and stayed in that business for that whole decade. And I've thought, you've done really well. And that's because the environment's really good for you. Like you thrive in that environment. It just wasn't the right environment for me. It wasn't the right relationship, basically.
And what advice would you give to somebody who is like early 20s, maybe they're queer, maybe they're in a job that they're not enjoying in the city or just something else, and they're sat there, they don't feel like they're really with their type of people, they're not stimulated, they're kind of similar minded to you in that sense back then. What would you say is like this is what you should be doing to kind of change that situation?
God. I think, I guess the advice I gave myself at that point was, you know, you don't have a huge amount to lose. Um, and trying something different is going to be better than doing something the same that isn't working. And I did try lots of other different things that didn't also work for me, and that was fine as well. But without trying and without kind of taking some leaps of faith, I was like, I can't. I think it's difficult as a person to kind of always sit with a kind of like what if question in your head. I think that's the thing that eats you up. It's not necessarily, you know, the job or the experience that you're having. It's the idea that something else maybe could be better for you or give you something that actually will allow you to progress in the way that you want in life. So I definitely would encourage people to try something new if they can. And also I think the good thing about the world of work today and how things are shifting is I do think there's a bit more flexibility in how companies are seeing this. Like I do know people that have said like, you know, I don't have maybe the means or the want right now to completely throw in the towel and completely start my life in a different way, but I can take like a sabbatical, or like I am able to take off like some extended leave or some unpaid leave, and I'm just going to go off and try something. And sometimes they come back and think, thank God I didn't, you know, throw in the towel for that. I hated it. And sometimes they think, actually, this was a great opportunity to like discover that actually, yeah, this is the right thing for me to move on. The rules and the boundaries of like, you know, possibilities in life, I think sometimes are slightly self-inflicted. It's amazing what you can get when you ask someone and you kind of are persistent about it. So yeah, kind of undoing those kind of internal boundaries and rules that you apply to yourself and thinking a little bit outside the box and then trying to encourage the people around you to let you do that, I think it would be a good way to start.
Let's fast forward to gay times. So you got the job at 24.
Mm-hmm.
The moment that you found out you got the job, how was that and how did it happen?
How did it happen? I was told by the previous CEO, and delighted, but like sheer panic, like total panic, because then it was like, oh wow, you've really done this now. You've got to do it. So it's not about talking anymore. You actually have to deliver. And that was terrifying. Exciting but terrifying. But I guess, you know, that kind of theme that's run through my life is sort of throwing myself out there and hoping I can swim instead of sink. And so very excited by the opportunity with a like, you know, mountain of naivety. I always think I wouldn't have gone for it if I wasn't that naive. Because if someone said to me, this is the reality of what you're about to go into, I would have run a mile.
Yeah.
But not knowing and then being super naive to like that whole experience was helpful, because it meant that I could at least go into it with sort of like this rose tinted glasses of what it was all going to be like, and that kind of momentum carried me through.
So would you say that the first initial months, or I don't know how long you would put it down to, but there's a lot of blagging it at the start?
Yes, in the sense that, you know, I'd never been a CEO, I'd never run a company. You know, how on earth did I really know what I was doing? What I did know is that I kind of at least had a vision for what I wanted to do with the business. I had a vision for the brand that I felt really passionate about. And I could assemble a group of people around me who are super talented that could help me do that. But yeah, you know, there's no training book of how to run a business. And, you know, you don't get taught it in school. You can read as many management books as you like. You know, it's nothing will ever come close to the real thing. And I think actually, again, as I've got older and met other CEOs and have become quite close with other people that run businesses, small and massive, it's mad how similar that experience is for everybody. You know, you kind of think, oh, this is just me because I've not done this before, but pretty much everyone talks about this idea that you're never actually ready. You have to do it, and you're like thrown into the fire and you figure it out. But it's more about who you are as a person that allows you to do that, rather than like, yeah, the books you've read or the skills that you have.
And did you experience any negativity towards your age at the time?
Would I say negativity? Skepticism, yeah. You know, healthy skepticism. Do I blame anyone? No. Would I be skeptical? Yes.
Yeah.
Like, I have a huge amount of compassion. How terrifying would it be to be thrown a 24-year-old and be like, this is your CEO now?
I honestly was living with my parents and looking for and God knows what I was doing at 24. So it's like,
Yeah.
it's crazy if you think about how young a 24-year-old is.
Yeah, so young. I look at pictures of myself then and I'm like, I'm a child.
Yeah.
Like, I'm literally like a kid. Like, so yeah, I don't blame anyone at all. Like, I think I'd feel the same way.
I mean, it's a big sacrifice for a 24-year-old as well, because at that age, a lot of people are going out, they're having a good time, they're still finding their feet, they're traveling, whatever. So to take on the role as CEO at 24, you're handing over a lot of your time and life, essentially. Did you feel the weight of that at the time, or did you not even have like a minute to really process that?
No, I felt the weight of it. It was very clear early on that this was going to be like a substantial change, and like that's the biggest thing that I think I really experienced in probably years 1 and 2 in the role was like sacrifice. Like, you sacrifice a huge amount. Your personal life, at times your mental well-being, your ability to experience things. I did loads of things. I stopped drinking 2 weeks into the role because I really quickly realized, I was like, that's not going to work. Like, there's no way that I can go out with my mates on a Friday night and just be like, yeah, cool, I'll be hungover all weekend and just like lie around. I was like, no, I have to work on Saturdays and Sundays because that's what I had to do at that point. So yeah, plenty of sacrifices. So the weight of the responsibility was very obvious to me in that point.
But it's very easy to get carried away, I imagine, because suddenly you're going to shoots, which maybe you weren't doing in previous jobs. You're hanging out with people that excite you. You're being invited to PR dinners and this sort of stuff. So it would be very easy to think, okay, I've got the job now.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to these dinners. I'm going to get absolutely shit-faced. I'm going to like meet these celebs. I'm going to do the Instagrams. So to be able to, at 24, have the maturity to like restrain yourself to like think, I'm the CEO here. I need to set by example. So did you have a lot of moments like that when you felt a bit like torn between like wanting to like just enjoy your 24-year-old self, but then also like having to take the position as boss?
Yeah, I think that comes down to, again, who you are as a person, the values you have and what you're interested in.
Yeah.
Yes, dinners and hanging out with celebrities is part of the role and it's enjoyable and it's nice to have those light moments. It's not the reason I do the job though. I think I've met plenty of people in the industry that do the job for that reason. And that's, evident in the way that they kind of go through their jobs and everything. But then I think that sometimes means that the priority and the value's in the wrong place. I don't do the job for that reason. It's a nice bonus. Like going to nice parties, drinking PR champagne is a bonus. It's not the job. And so I think when people have that perception or see that as the role, I think for sure I could make my role that. I always say, like, I could totally spend 300 days a year doing lovely, frivolous, free things, but I wouldn't be happy.
Yeah.
It doesn't make me happy. It makes me happy when it's in those small moments of joy and kind of like release here and there. And that's what's enjoyable to me. And I do enjoy it and I love it, but it's not the reason that I came in to do the job.
Well, I imagine it would be hugely detrimental to the company if you were the CEO that was doing that.
And that's when I made that point. There's plenty of people in the industry where that is the focus. And so when I look at those individuals, I do sometimes think, well, I think my perception at least is that you might have been able to achieve more and make more change or positively impact your space more if that wasn't your focus, but your focus is on the sparkly stuff.
Yeah. And you as a boss, as a recruiter of people that come and work at Gay Times as well, you must be quite trained now at sussing out if somebody that's coming in wants to work on the styling team or whatever team it is there to hang out with celebs, and they ask the questions that you're like, I'm not sure you're here for the right reason. Like, you must be quite good at fishing those people out and really like curating a good team. Yeah,
totally. I would say that I'm definitely not perfect, and it did take me a while to figure that out, because I think you always want to take people on what they say and their face value and what they tell you. I think it took me a while to kind of gain the skills to kind of go a little bit beyond that kind of superficial answer that someone might give in a job interview or in the first few months of their employment, where they're kind of telling you the things that you probably want to hear. Like, actually, is this really what you think? Or this is really what you feel? So now I'd say yes, but that took a while for me to figure out and understand what people's motives were and kind of why they were interested in joining the company.
would you say that you're just built differently, or you're incredibly disciplined when it comes to saying no to maybe just like being, you know, frivolous?
That's a good question. I guess I'd probably say that the thing I've probably noticed about my personality is that I'm naturally motivated quite highly. I don't find it particularly hard to find motivation. God knows where that comes from. And
I'm so jealous. That's so good. So you're not a TV in the middle of the day type of guy?
No, like I have this weird thing where like the minute I wake up, I'm out of bed. Like I find it impossible to like lie in bed
at 5 a.m. or something.
like, well, I don't know, but you know, like, you know, it's that thing, and it's, you know, I'm being honest, it kind of makes me feel unrelatable at points. Because
no, it's admirable.
You sort of like, you know, think people say, oh, we want to lounge around. Do I take rest? Yes. Do I also like lounge around and just watch TV on a Sunday? Absolutely, and that's important. I've become more practiced in that, and I've learned how to do that because it's not my default mode. But yeah, I think the motivation that I have is really high, and so I feel grateful for that. The one piece of feedback I give myself is often is just like chill out, like have fun. That's some of the kind of, you know, self work that I've done more recently, is kind of like enjoy it more. Because sometimes I look back and think like, look at everything you've just done in 3 months. When was the one point that you felt joy in any of that? And so everyone else tells you like, oh my God, wow, look at that. You know, you've just had this most amazing summer and you're all over the place and you're doing these incredible events. And I sit there in my head thinking like, yeah, I don't know if did I ever feel kind of happy in that moment, or did I just do it? Because the motivation's always there. You're just like, cool, next thing, let's go.
Would you say you're not very good at being present and mindful?
No, I'm good. I think I can be present and mindful. I think I practiced that definitely through my own work in therapy. It's the how I'm feeling about it. Right. So I can be present in the moment and be there with people, but taking that moment to reflect and be like, yeah, I feel good about this. Or like, I feel, you know, happy. I'm just going to enjoy this kind of moment for myself. That seems indulgent to me, right? Which it's not indulgent. It's important, but that's something that I find quite challenging to do. It's something actually I've related on with, as I've gone through my career and I've got to know more people in the public eye, big, like really, you know, big singers and pop stars and stuff and actors. Weirdly, that's the thing I talk to them most about, that I connect with them on most. So, you know, we don't talk about the, you know, the job stuff as much, in the sense of like, you know, the sparkly things. It's the connecting on, being on this roller coaster ride and always thinking about the next thing, always thinking about what else you can do, and never taking a moment just to enjoy the ride for a moment. And that's interestingly the thing that I found the most connection with those people on. A classic example is like, you know, I think about singers, they're like, right, so record, album, you know, singles, album cycle begins, tour, start again. If you're young and you're, you know, in the pop world, especially out in LA or something, you might do that for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years without taking any time off. So I talk to them and I say things that, again, I relate to. When you say, you know, you look at something like that, like this huge concert or something, and I go, do you remember it? They'd be like, no. Like, wow. You know, and it's a weird thing. Like, yes, I remember it. Of course, I was there. Yeah. You know, I remember doing it being amazing and having this like massive dopamine release and feeling great. But like, was I really there? Do I really remember any of that? Not really. Can I tell you, like, you know, what was the conversation I had with someone at that event versus that event? No. Does it all blur into one? Yes. So, you know, you kind of exist in this transient space. And so, as I say, although I have a completely different life to them, and I, you know, it's a very different set of circumstances, that's weirdly the thing that I often relate to them on, is sometimes thinking like, I don't quite feel like I've taken that moment to be like, wow, you know, this is really amazing, or like I feel really proud of myself today. Yeah. Those things don't tend to happen.
But it's interesting that people can do a really incredible job when they're in that state. So say someone is performing, or someone's leading a meeting, or someone's like, you know, hosting a huge event. They're doing an amazing job. Everyone thinks they're running slick. They're really high energy. And then they come out at the end of it and they go, oh, I was just completely on autopilot then.
Yeah. Performance mode.
It's mad, that, isn't it?
Yeah, it's performance mode. And so I totally, you know, come to realize that I'm in performance mode, you know, 95% of my life. Wow. So that's, you know, great, because it means that you can operate at that level. It means you can do all these amazing things and keep going, and you have this massive endurance. The downside to it is that if you exist in that space all the time, Like, when are you not performing? When are you not actually on for someone? Or when are you not thinking about how you're presenting or articulating or delivering to a certain kind of like objective? So again, that's where that relation comes in, because you're like, actually, when have you just existed for you, or done something that isn't kind of for that end goal?
Do you think that you can become addicted to the performance mode feeling, as in it's almost therapeutic to be in a space where you're just kind of charging forward without much overthinking? You're just getting on with it and doing a good job.
Yeah, because you've got all the hormonal releases that come with it. So you've got like, you know, everything that a drug would give you. It's like, you know, dopamine hits, it's like adrenaline, your heart rate increases. Absolutely. You know, that stuff is addictive in the sense that your body receives that signal, you feel good about it. And then of course you kind of come down and you think, oh, I want to get back there. So let's do something else. Let's do something else.
And there's something very nice about being very busy in the moment, manageable busyness. There's actually something quite, you feel important for one, you know, you've got a purpose. Stillness is actually quite difficult for some people, isn't it? Would you say that you relate to that?
Yeah, totally. Like that's the thing that I've had to work hard on, is to be okay with being still. Like, very difficult. And definitely operate better when I'm not like that. But then of course, again, you know, what any person that has done that album cycle, you know, release, tour, and done that in a row for 6 years will tell you, funnily enough, you can't do that. You know, your body gives out, or your mental health degrades massively. Or the other interesting one is that everyone gets so used to you in performance mode, and they like you in performance mode, that they actually don't know you, or they don't like you as the real you. So that's the other thing that I found quite interesting and related on, is then, you know, you understand actually everyone thinks that the performance you is normal. So therefore, when you're not in that mode, people are like, oh, you seem really down. We're like, what's wrong with you today? And you're like, I'm fine, actually.
Yeah.
But you equate that to something that's wrong. So then you're like, God, I need to get back to that like mode that everyone wants to be me to be in, which is like, you know, Tag's nice, he's confident, he's like chatty, and you know, everything's great. But that isn't actually who I am.
Yeah.
So it's weird how you get that kind of signal and feedback from others as well.
Because also maybe you're a quiet person. Maybe you are a bit more, you like to sit in your own thoughts a bit more, and you're not as social as maybe people see. And
yeah, I'm super introverted. Yeah.
And maybe you even lose sight of actually that. And when you go into that state, you're like, oh, this is actually feels very like normal for me. And when I'm going into work and these meetings and stuff, that's me having to like charge up my energy to actually pull it off.
Yeah, totally. And so yeah, I'm definitely built introverted as a person. That is who I am. So everything that is, you know, outward facing and events and all that stuff, it I say it's important to say I love it and I enjoy it, but it doesn't give me energy. I need to be charged up in order to do that.
Yeah.
And I tend to come out and then go like, whoa, God, I feel like I kind of been hit by a bus.
So do you like your alone time?
Yeah, love it.
And you don't live alone, do you?
Yeah.
Oh, you do, and you love it.
Yeah.
Would you ever go back to housemates or living with a partner or anything?
It's funny actually, yeah, because when I've dated or had boyfriends, I think I found that sometimes challenging to be able to kind of articulate the need for me to be able to have alone time still. I think it's an interesting societal thing where it's sort of seen as like, you know, something a bit weird or a bit wrong to be like, you know, I'm in a relationship and I don't want to see you.
Yeah.
And so that's always been a difficult thing to try and, you know, maintain that. But yeah, the alone time that I have is so important. And I say like I feel like, you know, it's a bit kind of like one line of cliche. I think any good idea I've come up with for gay times has been when I've been on my own for an extended period of time. Like if I need to draw an inspiration to really think about the company in like a very kind of lateral way or think big, I would go away for a week on my own.
Yeah.
That's when it will happen.
Do you ever have to leave a quite exciting moment to tap out and be like, I need to be alone now? So you could be at a really cool event or a dinner or something, but then you're like, you know, I need to leave now. Do you get that introverted pull to go home and be alone?
Yes.
Okay, I feel like I can relate to you on this so much, but it's something unexpected because you would assume that you would be the most extroverted person in the world because you have to be to pull your job off.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's where kind of relating it back to that point about what do you care about and what are you doing it for? I think when I've met those, you know, people in an industry that have got that opposite kind of like very extroverted energy naturally, things like the the events and the parties therefore are a draw to them. Of course they are, because it charges them up. It gives them that energy, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just, you know, how different you are as a person, how you're built, that helps you then relate to the role. But yes, you know, yeah, I totally have to. And I've got all my tricks and techniques to how I get like little bursts of recharge energy at an event and do all those things. And I've become more accepting of myself over the years. I sort of found myself annoyed with myself about it and being like, you should just be able to like have a dinner and be fine. What's wrong with you? Just, it's a dinner. Just get a grip and do it. And then I think over the years, I've had more compassion to myself and been like, it's okay that you can't just sit there for 4 hours. Like, and you have to leave at certain points, and not felt guilty about it. I think I felt a lot of guilt about that. And so more compassion with myself, and then actually learning like, what are the tools that I have in order to do that. My very close friends and very close colleagues or team, like the team that I have, know it. And so we have signals, and we know what it's like.
I'm just imagining like you do something and then everybody in the office is like, oh my God, he needs to be alone. It's like,
not in the office. It would never happen in the office. I think I'm very aware, just to like walk out and, you know.
Are you a fan of an Irish goodbye? Would you just leave without saying goodbye?
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, it's that you can see I feel guilty about it now. I am, and I do it relatively often. And
so you're at dinner with like Dua Lipa and Margot Robbie, and you're like, just leave.
I'd always think about, you know, especially if you're at dinners and stuff, you think about like who invited me.
Yeah.
Who is maybe the lead host here, and always have a quiet word with them. But there's ways you can do it, you know, like I used to sort of stand up and be like, oh, sorry, everyone. I'm just really tired, so I'm going to go now. And then it sort of interrupts the conversation. Everyone was like, oh, okay, we're just in the middle of our mains, bye. Whereas like now I'm like, okay, I know, just you don't need to do that. You can just go up to the person that's hosting and just say like, hey, and just have a really quiet word with them. And also then people get to know you. They don't take it as an offense at all. They're like, oh my God, totally fine, go.
Yeah. And how good are you at saying no to things?
Yeah, too good, because
you are good.
The inference, of course, is that actually that feels potentially like a challenge. So actually, a lot of the time, I have to really, think about what's the right thing to do, both for the company and for me, and then to kind of get that, I guess, like level of kind of energy in order to be able to go and do that. So yeah,
but that's something you need to learn, isn't it? Because when you first start out, especially particularly at the age of 24, the ability to say no to things is something that you get better at as you get older.
Totally. And you're right, when I started, I didn't say no to anything, because I was like, I need to like prove myself and get out there. I still stand by that being that right thing to do at that time, because I also, in the industry, no one had a clue who I was, right? So like, you just sort of get announced and you're, you know, in the marketing news and like the media news one day, and everyone's like, who the hell is this kid? Like, what? So I needed to go to every event to like meet everybody. And like a company like Gay Times has like, you know, thousands of stakeholders. You have people across loads of different industries and different walks of life that have some relationship with the company in some capacity. So I had to get out there and be on that front line all the time.
Okay, so obviously, running a business for LGBTQ people, how do you navigate that? That's quite a weighty thing, isn't it? To think that we're a voice of a community in some regard, but also just making sure that everybody feels happy with the output.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. I think the other thing that I came in, and this was actually like a day one thing for me when I came to the job, was, again, I started talking to the team about this idea that my perception, at least of media, was people sitting in these ivory towers, throwing magazines out, you know, and letting them land on the floor with all of the commoners and saying, you know, this is interesting, go and read it and be inspired by me.
Yeah.
And I was like, that is not where the world is going. And so, and thankfully time has proven over that 6-year period that was correct, I think. So I was like, we can't be in a space where we are dictating trends and we see ourselves as the kind of editors and purveyors of what the world should be thinking and our community should be, you know, looking like, and all of this stuff. I was like, this is really damaging. Like our role is to be a part of the fabric of the community on the same level as them, and to be a part of that. We're not there to tell them what to think. We're not there to tell them what to wear or how to look. We're there to try and reflect back at them, part of themselves, and to highlight things that maybe they wouldn't have seen before. And so I think that kind of like, bringing us down from the tower and kind of getting us onto a level playing field was an inherent part of my like day one strategy. Did everyone agree with that? No. And I think some people found that was super challenging, because I also basically asked people in that moment to get rid of their entire ego. And so that isn't necessarily what people want to do. Again, not criticizing that, but it's just not what they really signed up for. People sometimes do join media companies because they're like, I want my voice to be heard.
Yeah.
I want to say things and people to listen. And I was basically saying to them, I don't want you to do that anymore. I want you to listen and reflect back and to be less about you, and it needs to be more about them. So I think really that was, as I say, something that I kind of pitched in as like this big shift we were going to make in terms of how the company was seeing themselves and how we were going to think about our role within the community. And then of course with that alongside, strategies that were kind of within the team of what the kind of content we were going to speak about, and the kind of the different kind of audience segments that we wanted to speak to over time, that increased that level of trust and bond between us and the community, where naturally the community was saying like, actually, yeah, God, Gay Times really feels like it represents me, and it sort of speaks for me in a way, and I see myself there, and I see myself respected by them, and kind of reflected in the work that they do. And so that takes time, but I think that's really where I wanted to get to, that got us to this point, which was the end goal, that we would be the most trusted media company within our space. And that was the goal for us.
What's your opinion on cancel culture in general?
What's my opinion on cancel culture? I think that the challenge that we have at the moment is that because our access to information and access to people is so instantaneous, we expect kind of instantaneous responses. And you see that across like the way that our social lives work, and how we're kind of really connected to our phone as an extension of us, all of that stuff. And I think that sometimes the downside to that is that it gives very little room for anybody to take any moment to consider, whether that be like consider a response to something or consider their position. And I think what it has inadvertently done is made this environment where everyone is expected to be able to speak on everything with the kind of, utmost of knowledge at all times instantaneously, when that is impossible. And so when I see people kind of quote unquote being cancelled, not all the time, but sometimes it's because we're expecting something of them that we shouldn't necessarily be expecting of them, I think. And that is because they are not potentially experienced or qualified or have the right sort of information in order to be able to speak on a particular topic. And yet we are expecting them to be able to speak eloquently and fluidly in a way that is respectful of all perspectives, let's say. And when they can't do that, we then say, you are not good enough, and you are going to be cut, and we're going to, throw you to the wolves, kind of thing. And I think it's an expectation of individuals at times that is just kind of not viable. It's impossible to do that. Having said that, of course, then you might have, individuals where they are, experienced on a particular topic. They do have kind of credibility in the space, and they do say something or come out with something that you think, God, that's really not right and that's wrong, and they're called out for it. And I think that what is maybe potentially kind of a good step forward is that there is an ability now for them to understand that, and to be shown that people maybe don't appreciate that viewpoint, and therefore, whatever, they may be able to apologize for that, or to try and come out and say, actually, I got something wrong, and I need to kind of fess up for that. Whereas I found that when media was a bit more linear and you didn't have that feedback cycle, there was no real ability for the audience to weigh in on anything. So people often didn't really know when they got stuff wrong, or if they did get something really wrong, there was no sort of consequence for it. Life just went on, and therefore the status quo remained the same. We absolutely prioritize the perspectives of LGBTQ+ people as a whole, of course. Like, that's what we're most interested in, because that's kind of the community that we serve. But I think that we are very careful to make sure that we're listening to individuals and making sure that we're taking that into account. I think also at the same time, again, it's such this balancing act, because when you kind of overexpose yourself and you kind of spend too much time there, you can then become really reactive and kind of try and then go, actually, because I've got that piece of critique, let's kind of go in this direction and this direction. And then you kind of lose all your integrity because you're just trying to please everyone and navigate through it. So it's definitely a balance.
Okay, I want to talk about some of your favorite memories at gay time over the past 6 years. I know that you said that sometimes you find it hard to actually like sit back in the moment and think about it. So you might say your favorite memory is going home and being alone at the end of it.
No, there's some great moments. Yeah.
So I guess like if you looked at like the past 5.5 years, 6 years, would you say that you have like an achievement, a sort of personal high that you can reflect on?
One thing that I often think about is I have a very big attachment to New York City. I love New York, and I've spent a lot of time there since being a teenager. One of my best friends lived there, and then over the years I've developed a really amazing friendship group there, and I do love it. And I feel a sense of place there and home there. I feel very much myself in New York. So New York's had a really special part of me, of my life, and so we've been a kind of official media partner and an international media partner of New York City Pride for many, many years. And so this was, I believe this is the thing I don't even know. It was 2021 maybe, or 2022. Anyway, at some point kind of obviously post-COVID. And I remember we went out to New York City, and we were there to kind of enjoy the Pride weekend, etc. And this is about the job giving you opportunities that you wouldn't normally get. So to put it in that kind of context of gay times, you then of course are given like a AAA, and you are able to do basically anything you want to do. Now, in the moment that happens, for me at least, it's always very humbling, because obviously you've built a relationship with people where they trust you in order to give you that access, right? Yes, it's just a lanyard, but it sort of signifies a bit more than that. And so I was with some of the team, and I actually met with Lady Phil, who was the Grand Marshal that particular year of New York City Pride. And we had this kind of really special moment where we just spoke to each other right at the beginning of the kind of Pride March. And then she kind of got zipped off, and like, I think she was in a golf cart, which was kind of like chic, because she was like, bye, and then kind of zipped out. And so I went on to the Avenue, and I just walked like 4 blocks of the Avenue alone. And I thought, like, when in your life do you ever walk down, like, I can't remember if it was 5th or 6th, but basically, when do you walk down like an avenue of New York City in the middle of summer, and the whole avenue was completely empty?
Wow, yeah.
And I was just on my own, and I just walked alone down there. And of course, as I got further south, the crowd started to kind of appear, and people on the side of the fences, right? But just that experience of walking alone, in my own like head.
So you were alone.
I was alone. Oh my God, I love that I gave you the story, and then as I started saying it, I was like, "Tag, you're alone."
Yeah.
Your most special moment is alone. It was like massively humbling. Like when it's like saying to someone like, "Can you close down Regent Street for me to walk alone?" Like, how does that happen?
Yeah.
How do you get to walk down like, one of the most, busy like thoroughfares in the entire planet on your own?
Yeah.
And you just take in that experience. It was just bizarrely magical.
Yeah.
And mostly because of the fact that the thing that kept coming into my head is that you're only here because of that access that the role in the company has been able to afford you.
Yeah.
And so that felt special because it was connected to the business in that way.
And was the like sun glowing, and was it
just no, it was really like, it was like baking sun, super incredible weather.
Nice.
And just like kind of silence. And it was just this insane.
But the sort of like the beating pulse of
that.
Pride happening in the background.
Yeah.
So the excitement was there.
Yeah. And the kind of pulse of it. And you could see the people starting to kind of gather, further down south that you went. So it was all kind of there in the distance and everything that's about to happen. It's that kind of like, 11 o'clock moment where it's kind of all about to start, and it's that anticipatory feeling as well. So you've got the kind of got that nervous energy.
Yeah.
So yeah, that felt very special. But yeah, I can't believe that I just gave you an example that was
No,
about being alone.
I relate. No, it's nice because people were there. They were
Yeah,
excited.
they were just
They were excited.
somewhere else.
But you were here. They were
else
there.
alone.
Traveling's obviously like something that you do a lot.
Yeah.
You must have to go all over the shop for various bits and bobs. Would you say that you have like a very like strict routine?
Unless I get to the airport and sort of like kind of, you know, walk through security, walk to the gate and walk onto the plane, then I failed. If I've sat down,
you don't want any chill time at the airport?
No, if I've sat down at the airport, I failed. So I'm like, everything is like just like clockwork through the whole process. And then if I sit down for 20 minutes, I'm like, oh, I could have got here 20 minutes later.
You know, if you're going to New York, how many hours in terms of like, I want to be at Heathrow at this time, takes off at this time?
Like ideally 10 minutes before check-in closes.
So what's that like?
Hell,
an hour and 10. An hour and 10. My God, have you ever missed a flight?
Yes.
For work or personal?
Both. Yeah, totally. But not that often, not as often as you might expect with that like tight time sort of situation. But yeah, of course I have every now and again. Yeah, I remember being on like the train to Heathrow and being like, you really effed this one up. Like, you know, you didn't do any contingency.
Yeah.
I definitely think I've got a little bit better at like, again, not being quite so crazy about that. But yeah, I do have a tendency.
And talking about young people, so obviously like you must even like receive letters from young people, as you've said, and people get in touch with Gay Times all the time of lots of different ages, lots of different stories. I think it's easy for maybe 30 plus gays to look at the Lil Nas generation, so like 16 to 25-year-olds, and think, wow, it looks really liberating now. It feels like almost cool to be gay.
Yeah.
It seems like something that straight people would even want to be when they're young. Is there any truth in that?
I think there's definitely an element where certain parts of the world and certain kind of geographies and demographics have seen diversity of identity as a really incredible thing, which is amazing. And I think that's probably happening more, that's kind of what's happening at large. And then of course that experience that you say is therefore if I am queer, because it's not seen as like the default, you know, necessarily, therefore that's good because I'm interesting, I'm different, and difference is seen as something that's positive and to be celebrated and also to be cultivated in people. So sort of we see difference and we see parts of their personality that are unique to them. We like that and we want them to like that about themselves and develop that to be a kind of well-rounded person. So I think that's really incredible. I think that it's sort of my perspective, at least on it, is that that's a sort of like potentially oversimplified. I think that's happening in spaces and in like pockets, but by and large, it's still immensely challenging for like a large number of people. And I think that, of course, when we then start thinking about like intersectional identity within LGBTQ+, that's often where lots of those challenges, you know, already continue to exist. So, you know, for sure, if you maybe live in the middle of London and you're, you know, going to like a particular school here that's got like really progressive values and you have a fairly nice life in that world, then, you know, you're queer now and you're like the coolest kid in school. And that's, you know, potentially, you know, an example of where that's happening, but there are plenty of places where that also isn't happening. So I think it's sort of oversimplistic to think that's just like universal now across the board, that like everyone just lives in like the Euphoria TV show and is kind of like super cool and queer in that way.
Yeah.
But I also think like the way that then that younger generation is relating to each other is very different. And I think they are being kind of exposed to more diversity and exposed to more experiences in life that gives them that ability to kind of respect each other a little bit more.
Yeah. So what sort of struggles, common threads come through? Are you seeing patterns in young people struggling with these days?
Yeah. So the thing that often I get told is that like where we thought we were the problem, like now that generation realizes that they aren't the problem, but everyone else is.
Okay.
So I think that's where the challenge comes. So it's that kind of idea of like, well, I did go through school at parts of my life being like, God, there's something wrong with me. Like maybe I need to be better. If I remember thinking if I just had a girlfriend, then I'd at least be like good enough or okay. So of course I'm kind of reflecting on myself in that capacity in a kind of poor sense, that if I change and conform and be like everyone else, then, you know, I'll be good enough. I think with some of the queer kind of kids and teens that I speak to, they're not necessarily thinking like that. So they're kind of like, okay, potentially with their queer identity. What they are frustrated about is that the kind of world at large is making it very difficult for them to express that in some capacity, or putting constraints on them, or not allowing them to be the full part of their identity, or, you know, essentially is providing a playing field that is really challenging for them to operate in. So I'd say that that is a challenge for them, and therefore tends to affect their mental well-being. You know, of course, there's lots of great like studies around, you know, significantly increased levels of anxiety, increased levels of depression, because that exposure now is so great to the realities kind of the world at large.
And do you think though that they, more than any other generation, have access to better support networks, and the media out there is, they can relate to a lot more than potentially people who are 30 plus now, so hopefully they wouldn't feel as alone as potentially older generations did at that time?
Again, an interesting one, because we do a lot of we do loads of surveying of the audience. We do like big surveys of like tens of thousands, and we sometimes actually see that within the younger age groups, like sometimes you see this indexing of them actually feeling like more isolated and more alone. I think actually that sometimes comes down to the fact that they don't necessarily have the means in which to connect. And I think the great example with that is like the kind of like you know, the culture around drinking and going to the pub or the bar or something, which again, when I grew up being gay and through my teens and early adulthood, that really was the kind of center of gravity around our social like interactions.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that isn't the case anymore, because of course the younger generations are potentially not as interested in drinking alcohol, and that isn't something that they value, because they value other things over and above that. And therefore potentially the environments of which that they have to connect with each other aren't actually there yet. So I think there's been some amazing work done by lots of different organizations, and we think about it a lot, of course, when we do things in the real world, which is like to think about, okay, well, how do younger people want to connect? How can we give them spaces in which to speak to each other and engage in a non-digital capacity? And I think that will continue to move in that direction for the younger generation. One great example is like, you know, queer running is like massive now. Like, you know, that's where people are, younger queer people are kind of meeting friends and feeling a sense of kind of community. They're not feeling that necessarily in a bar in Soho. And that's the kind of shift that's I think happening at the moment. I think the point about that, why you get that kind of dichotomy of like, you know, there's maybe some opportunities to connect, but why do they feel so lonely, is because I think beforehand the emphasis has been on digital connections and kind of, yes, being able to meet each other in a digital capacity, but does that give you the same feeling of sense of belonging that maybe something that in real life would give you? And I think that's maybe the kind of shift that might be happening now, is that there's more opportunities, not a lot still, but more being created to meet each other in real life and feel that sense of belonging together. Whereas you and I would have had that from, you know, going to Soho on the Friday night, being drunk with each other. I don't know about you, but we used to go back to, you know, one of my mates' house, you all crash together, then you wake up the next day and have shit food. And, you know, that was part of the experience.
And you bond over hungover stories.
Exactly. You talk about the funny stuff that happened the night before and who made out with who. And like, that was part of it. And I think when you take away all of that, there's that void left. And so when just digital interactions fill that void, I think there's something else to be said about how people want to connect in a physical way.
Yeah. Would you go out anymore? Do you find that you're out drinking like we used to? Obviously, we were talking about in our early 20s and 18-year-olds, like we were going out all the time as our form of bonding. But how would you say that you connect with people in a sort of social setting?
Personally, I think because and we've talked about kind of a bit more about my personality and how I work. So naturally, nightclubs for me are like severely anxiety inducing, and they kind of always have been in a way. I didn't realize it, of course, when I was younger, but I was totally just using alcohol to kind of drown that anxiety out and that nervousness. So I would say that smaller things like dinners tend to be, the places that I kind of socialize better and meet other people. And often I'll be, which is great again with the role, and I feel really happy about that. People will often invite me to a dinner with maybe 6 or 8 people, and I might not know half the room. And that tends to be how I kind of meet and interact with people on a more kind of intimate basis. And that works well for my personality as well. I find that a bit easier. Whereas, I wouldn't tend to go to like a nightclub or something like that.
Do you know what? I've really gotten into sofa friends. So I like to just invite people around and we'll watch like reality TV and hang out and not even talk that much. We'll just chill next to each other.
It's classic introvert. I do also do that. I sometimes have people over and we just watch TV and then kind of in silence.
But that's the best. If you can find someone that you don't have to go to an expensive dinner with.
Yeah.
I don't know about you. I much prefer dinners with one person rather than like 3 or 4 or 5.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, nearly all of my interactions are one-on-one.
Yeah,
nearly all.
So here we are, sofa friends.
I know,
this is perfect.
Love it. Thanks for having me as your sofa friend.